Most box office bombs are studio screw-ups, but I found 15 movies where one person tanked the entire thing. Like I got here a guy whose spider kink ruined the whole movie, and another one who was so toxic he got the director fired days into filming. And of course, an absolute legend who managed to get his genitals crushed by a giraffe on set. Let's start with the movie that was dead the moment Kevin Spacey's name hit the news. Here's a movie that didn't get killed by what happened on set, but by what happened off it. Billionaire Boys Club was just a standard indie crime drama, nothing special. But when the Kevin Spacey scandal broke in 2017, the whole thing basically died overnight. Spacey was just a supporting actor here, but after those allegations, nobody wanted anything to do with the project. Didn't matter that Ansel Elgort and Taron Egerton were in it too. The distributor gave it a tiny release. Barely any theaters, zero marketing. Opening day, the movie made just $126 at the box office. By the end of its domestic run, it still hadn't hit 1,000. It's one of the worst box office openings ever. Vertical Entertainment put out a statement basically saying, "We know Spacey's in this, but we hope you'll still give it a chance." Of course, that didn't work. At the time, Spacey was already being cut out of movies. They replaced his scenes in All the Money in the World. House of Cards on Netflix dropped him. Billionaire Boys Club didn't have a chance. There's a lot to say about this one, but the main thing everyone remembers is the giant mechanical spider. I don't know what this guy's deal was, but producer Jon Peters was way into spiders for years. He even tried to put one in a Superman movie. It never worked, but he finally made it happen here. In the finale, you get this massive 80-foot steampunk spider, which was supposed to be the big wow moment. All it really did was make the movie look ridiculous. The rest of the film is just as dumb. It's Will Smith, steampunk western, a bunch of toy-ready gadgets, but the tone is all over the place, part sci-fi, part western. It never fits together. They spent around $170 million making it and only made $113 in the US, so it had to rely on overseas money just to get close to even. Over the years, Will Smith and director Barry Sonnenfeld kind of blamed the producers for what happened. Smith even apologized for the movie. He just said, "I'm sorry about that one, got caught up in the merchandising." Most people agree Jon Peters' obsession with the spider and all the toys ruined the whole thing. What started out as a pretty standard Wells adaptation just fell apart the moment Val Kilmer arrived. He was going through a divorce and riding high off Batman Forever, so he showed up late and immediately began tormenting the director and crew. Richard Stanley, the original director, barely lasted a few days before the studio fired him, all because he just couldn't rein Kilmer in. It got so bad that one executive producer claims Kilmer literally burned a crew member's face with a cigarette during an argument. John Frankenheimer stepped in to direct after that, but things didn't get better. He went on record saying, "I don't like Val Kilmer, I don't like his work ethic, and I don't want to be associated with him ever again." Kilmer responded with this: "When certain people criticize me for being demanding, I think that's a cover for something they didn't do well. I think they're trying to protect themselves." Kilmer also had constant clashes with Marlon Brando. The two of them would just sit in their trailers refusing to come out, so the whole production would freeze until someone caved. Delays piled up, rewrites kept coming, and the budget just kept growing. By the time the movie finally hit theaters, it barely cleared $50 million against a $40 million budget. Dr. Dolittle was supposed to be a big family musical, the kind of movie 20th Century Fox could build a franchise around. Instead, it turned into a 4-year disaster, and almost all the problems can be traced back to Rex Harrison. The studio gave him free rein after My Fair Lady, even though he couldn't actually sing, and he took advantage of it at every turn. Harrison vetoed a black co-star Sammy Davis Jr. and threatened to walk unless they paid off another actor. He spent the shoot bullying everyone, spouting racist and anti-Semitic bullshit, and even demanded a co-star's role be cut because he didn't want to get upstaged. The younger cast started pushing his buttons on purpose just to mess with him. Even the animals hated him. Production actually had to stop for 3 days after a giraffe stepped on Harrison's genitals. The budget tripled and the schedule dragged on for years. When Dr. Dolittle finally limped into theaters, people just didn't care. Most found it way too long and pretty dull. Fox threw a ton of money at Oscar voters to try and salvage it, managed to get 9 nominations, but it didn't matter. The film lost around $12 million and almost took the studio down with it. This whole thing started with Gore Vidal's novel, which was already controversial. For some reason, the studio handed the directing job to Michael Sarne. He was basically an unknown British actor with almost no directing experience. Once he got hold of the project, he threw out Vidal's draft and decided he was going to make some kind of dreamy fantasia. In reality, it meant random clips from old movies, out-of-nowhere musical numbers, and a bunch of satire that never connects. On set, Sarne's reputation just got worse. He'd disappear for hours into his trailer or waste half a day filming something like a cake. The whole production turned into a mess, with nobody really getting any direction, so every scene just feels totally disconnected from the last. Of course, the movie bombed in theaters. It got an X rating, people hated it, and critics weren't much kinder. One called it as awful as it is legendary. The studio yanked it out of theaters fast, and it made less than $2 million on a $5 million budget. Michael Sarne's directing career basically ended right there. Even Gore Vidal disowned it after he saw what Sarne had done. Peter Bogdanovich was on a hot streak in the early 70s. He made Last Picture Show, then Paper Moon. Everything he touched was a hit. So Fox basically let him do whatever he wanted. He picked a Cole Porter musical and cast his girlfriend Sybil Shepherd alongside Burt Reynolds. The thing is, neither of them could sing or dance, but Bogdanovich kinda didn't care. He made every actor perform their songs live on set, no pre-recording. Apparently, he tried to capture that old-school 1930s feel. He also micromanaged everything, wanted it shot in soft color that kind of looked like black and white, and the whole thing just dragged on, way over budget and way behind schedule. The rushes showed off-key singing and tap dancing that didn't land, but he wouldn't back down. For some reason, he was sure his vision would work. When the movie finally came out, it was absolutely massacred in reviews. Most of them just made fun of the budget and the performances. Audiences stayed away completely. The flop was so bad it ruined a whole bunch of careers, including Bogdanovich's. Fox was so embarrassed they didn't even put it out on video for decades. Bogdanovich actually apologized for the movie later, even tried recutting it years later, but in 1975 it was just a punchline. Imagine having so much money you can literally bankroll any movie you want. That's exactly what happened to the founder of the Unification Church, and he decided he was going to bankroll a Hollywood epic about General MacArthur's 1950 invasion at Inchon. He put somewhere between $30 and $46 million of church money into this thing. The result is the most expensive B-movie ever made. Moon wanted a pro-MacArthur piece of propaganda. He brought in Terrence Young, the guy who directed a bunch of James Bond movies, and managed to land Laurence Olivier to play MacArthur. None of that could save it. The script made no sense, and production was a mess. They shot in South Korea, and just about everything that could go wrong did. There were typhoons, an earthquake, and even political interference from local officials who didn't trust Moon or his church. The delays started piling up at $200,000 a day, and the budget just kept growing. When Inchon finally got shown in 1981, people could not believe what they were watching. MGM had agreed to distribute it, but they pulled the film after just a week. Inchon made about $5 million on a budget that was 10 times that. The New York Times called it one of the biggest bombs of the 1980s. Elaine May was a genius writer and comedian, but she hadn't directed in a decade. She got a shot at this movie thanks to Warren Beatty, who also starred and produced. May was given a big budget and total freedom to make this adventure comedy about two terrible lounge singers who get caught up in Middle East intrigue. May's perfectionism turned into obsession pretty fast. She demanded endless retakes, shot a mountain of footage, and clashed with Beatty over creative control. They filmed on location in Morocco, right in the middle of actual civil unrest. The crew had to deal with guerrilla fighters, landmines, and even kidnap threats. Naturally, the budget exploded, starting at $27.5 million and ending up at $55. By the time they finished shooting, things were so tense that editing was split between 3 teams. There was one for May, one for Beatty, and one for Dustin Hoffman, who also starred. All of them were trying to rescue their own version of the movie. By the time Ishtar came out, it had been trashed in the press for months, mostly because of stories about its budget and on-set disasters. Critics were ready to hate it, and they did. The film made $14 million domestically, which didn't even scratch the budget. Columbia's new studio boss hated it too and said so in public. The flop ended May's directing career, at least for big studio movies. How do you follow one of the greatest horror films ever? John Boorman, serious director, definitely had a vision, comes in after the original Exorcist and decides, let's not do horror at all. He actually didn't even like the first one's approach. So instead of scares, you get a movie about telepathy, hypnosis, and a bunch of weird spiritual talk. Boorman swore he was making something thoughtful about good and evil, not another gory chiller. The studio went along with it, the cast followed him, until they saw what they'd signed up for. The whole production was a mess. Boorman nearly died from a virus, Richard Burton apparently drank his way through his scenes, and that signature horror imagery from the original was gone completely. When it opened, people weren't scared, they were laughing. Word got out fast. There's this story about the first screening where people chased Warner Brothers execs out into the street after it ended. The studio tried to panic fix it. They chopped 10 minutes and changed the ending, but it didn't help. The movie's box office was a fraction of the original, and critics wasted no time calling it one of the worst ever made. Producer Irwin Allen was known as the master of disaster after the Poseidon Adventure and the Towering Inferno. So he decided to direct one himself, The Swarm, a movie about killer bees attacking cities. This was peak 70s disaster hype. Big cast, wild premise, and Allen hyping it up like it was going to be the next big thing. But it turned out the only disaster was the movie itself. Allen just recycled everything from his earlier hits. There's huge cast led by Michael Caine and Henry Fonda, tons of subplots, but the effects look cheesy even for the time. There's a scene where the cast is arguing seriously about whether the bees are from Africa, while Houston is literally burning in the background, and it's all played completely straight. Michael Caine's never even watched the movie. By 1978, people were over disaster movies, but Allen didn't get the memo. The Swarm bombed $7 million at the box office on a $20 million budget. Allen's next 2 movies flopped too, and after that, he never made another big studio movie. By the late 80s, the Star Trek movies were riding high. That's probably why Paramount let William Shatner direct the 5th one. Shatner had this idea after watching a televangelist. He wanted the Enterprise crew to literally meet God at the center of the galaxy. So the final frontier gets made, with Shatner not just directing but also co-writing. The story has Spock's long-lost half-brother hijacking the ship to go find the Almighty. Right away, the problem started. Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley both pushed back. There was no way their characters would betray Kirk, even under cult brainwashing. The studio, worried after the last movie's comedy success, forced Shatner to jam in more jokes to copy that tone. Then the budget ran out before they could shoot the original ending, which was supposed to have rock monsters. Instead, what's left is the Enterprise crew facing off against a fake god who just asked for a starship. When the final frontier hit theaters, it opened decently, but people figured out fast it wasn't working. The box office was less than half what the last movie made. Everyone hated it. People were saying that Shatner's ego finally killed Star Trek. Even the cast and crew admitted it was all Shatner's fault. Waterworld was the most expensive movie ever made at that point, and most people point to Kevin Costner as the main reason why. Costner had a ton of power after winning his Oscars, and he used every bit of it. He butted heads with Kevin Reynolds, the official director. Costner wanted the script rewritten to make his character more heroic and more of the focus. They started shooting with no finished script, and it went downhill fast. Storms destroyed the sets, a stuntman nearly died, Costner himself almost got swept out to sea. The budget ballooned to $175 million, which was insane at the time. Tensions between Costner and Reynolds kept rising, so Reynolds eventually quit in post-production. He said Costner should just direct his own movies from now on so he could always work with his favorite director. Costner finished editing the film himself with the studio's support. Costner painted himself as the guy saving the movie. He even told the press he was just carrying the film to safety, but a lot of people on set felt he was the main problem. Reynolds said Costner took over and changed everything, then left Reynolds holding the bag. Lady in the Water is probably the clearest example of one person blowing up their own career live on screen. Shyamalan had just come off a bunch of hits and figured it was time to make his bedtime story, literally a movie about a sea nymph showing up in an apartment complex pool. Disney, who'd backed him for years, saw the script and told him straight up, this was weird, it needed work. Nina Jacobson, the exec at Disney, gave him actual feedback, and that's all it took. Shyamalan bailed, took the project to Warner Brothers, and made sure the whole blow-up became public. He even authorized a tell-all book that made him look like a misunderstood genius. Lady in the Water flopped hard. On a $70 million budget, it only made $42 in the US. Warner Brothers gave him a blank check, and what came out was the self-referential fairy tale nobody wanted. The main problem? Shyamalan was so convinced of his own genius that he ignored every bit of criticism, and the whole thing just cratered. Will Smith wanted to set up a vehicle for his son Jaden, so he came up with the story, produced it, and even hired Shyamalan to direct, but made sure this was his project, top to bottom. Originally, it was supposed to be a simple father-son survival story, not even set in space, but Smith kept tweaking and moving things around. Shyamalan was brought in, but Smith's company ran the show. Will even made the creative call to sideline his own character for most of the movie, so Jaden would do most of the heavy lifting. Marketing pushed the Smith duo so hard that it turned into a punchline. Everyone was just calling it nepotism. When After Earth hit, it barely made a dent. $27 million opening weekend, nothing close to a Will Smith hit. Critics hated it. Rotten Tomatoes dropped it to 12%. The film lost money, and even Will Smith called it the most painful failure of his career. Shyamalan caught some blame, but it was clear this was Smith's project. He controlled the script, the casting, pretty much everything. Town and Country barely gets mentioned these days, and the blame for that goes straight to Warren Beatty. This was supposed to be a star-studded comedy with Beatty, Goldie Hawn, and Diane Keaton. But what happened was a runaway production that dragged on for nearly 3 years. They burned through almost $90 million and only made 10 back. Beatty insisted on starting production without a finished script, demanded constant rewrites and reshoots, and just wouldn't let anything go until it felt right to him. The studio head at New Line actually called Beatty out. They literally said his control freak routine was the main reason the budget exploded. As filming dragged, everyone's schedule started to conflict. New directors came in just to film pickup scenes, and the release date changed a dozen times. By the time the movie limped into theaters, there was zero promotion. New Line had given up completely. So it bombed and basically ended Beatty's run as a lead actor for almost a decade. He tried to blame everyone else after the fact, but nobody actually bought it.